I like Vedic astrology because it actually follows where the constellations were at the time of whatever chart you're using. Western is stuck in like 100 AD, so it's not accurate to where everything is now. So you wouldn't be able to see all this information in your Western chart. So that's why I use Vedic. So one of the things that you see that jumps out right away is he has 4 Aries placements. He's got Mercury, Sun, Mars, and Venus in Aries. So some of those are early degree. The Mercury and Sun are 3 degrees for Mercury and 8 degrees for the Sun. That's actually a nakshatra, which is a smaller division of the signs that they use in Vedic astrology, and it's those are in Ashwini. That's what it's called, and it's basically the symbol of the horse. They're called the cosmic healers, but they have that kind of like charging forward, intense energy that just like blasts through shit. It's kind of like it is very much like Aries. It's a stereotypical Aries, but they have a lot of vitality and energy, and that's what his sun sign is, as well as his Mercury sign. Excuse me. So he also has Mars and Venus in Aries. Those are both at 24 degrees, which is in a different nakshatra called Bharani, which is still in Aries, obviously, but it's a little bit different. It deals with kind of like bringing in spiritual and occult knowledge and creativity and bringing it into the world in a more objective way, in a more substantial, like grounded way. So a lot of people who have like Bharani are actually in Western it's calculated to be Taurus. So there's actually some similarities between Bharani and Taurus, because Bharani is ruled by Venus. So actually Venus is in its own nakshatra in his chart. so it deals with death. There's like the god associated with it is the god of death. And there's a lot of people who have Bharani placements that are like graphic designers or do some kind of creative work or something more occult based. And that's really true for Hitler. It's the occult and the kind of like graphic design. Sorry, I got like a scratchy throat right now. So if you think about what he did, creating the logo with the what do you call it, swastika, and his whole like creating these videos, these like movies that are supposed to be inspirational and convince people to follow his agenda. It really fits with the Bharani nakshatra pretty strongly. So, and another thing there is that Mars is in Aries in the 7th house. So these are all in the 7th house, but Mars being in Aries in the 7th house is called the Panchamaha Purusha Yoga. It's one of the main yogas in Vedic astrology. And so it basically indicates that he has strong martial talent, like Mars energy, action-oriented, leadership kind of energy. So that's really strong in his chart. So these 4 planets, Mercury, Sun, Mars, Venus, being in the 7th house means that 7th house stuff is really big, which is relationships, partnerships, business. And because it's a cardinal or Kendra house, it's one of the main more powerful houses. It's also the 10th house from the 10th house. So it's kind of like the career. It's kind of tied to the career. So this Aries energy is really tied to his career, you can say, in some sense. So another important things in his chart here, he's a Libra rising. So that's more focused on like justice and fairness, and maybe that makes him want to help the German people in some way. It's also a very creative sign as well. And also his moon is in Sagittarius, along with Jupiter, so it's in his own sign. Jupiter is in Sagittarius, its own sign. And then K2 is in Sagittarius as well. So what that means is he actually has Moon and Jupiter conjunct K2, which means that his moon, his mind, and his kind of like philosophical, spiritual guru kind of energy is tied to deep past life experience. Like he's really advanced in those things. So when something's with K2, it signifies you've been working on these things a lot. So he's been using his intuition in his mind and his kind of spiritual guru teacher kind of energy a lot in past lives. And so he's coming into this life to try to finalize that, to find a more mature approach to that, or visit it in a different way. But obviously, the way he did it was very destructive. But it's very true and obvious that he played like this teacher role, this kind of like a guru in a sense, having this whole philosophy that he's teaching about. So what that means is those three planets, Moon, Jupiter, and K2, are in the third house, and Rahu is always opposite K2. So Rahu is in the ninth house. And because he's a Libra rising, that means that the Rahu is always going to be in the opposite sign as the house. So basically, it's in Rahu's in Gemini, but it's in the ninth house. So that kind of means like he's dealing with the same issues but opposite. So the ninth house is typically aligned with Sagittarius kind of energy. It's the same kind of thing. And the third house is like Gemini because it's the third house, third sign. So what that axis basically means is he's dealing with trying to find a grounded way to communicate with people and reach a lot of different people. But then he's also really aspiring towards a higher philosophy, a uniting overall philosophy or spiritual outlook on things. So that's what Rahu in the ninth house with Gemini basically indicates. So those are some big things in his chart there. Some other things we can look at is because he's a Libra rising, you can look to see where the first house ruler is, which is Venus, and that's in the seventh house. So that means that a big area for him is relationships and partnerships, business partnerships, or different agreements he makes with other people. That's like a big area for him. And then you can also look at the 10th house. In the 10th house, he has Saturn. So Saturn's a big indicator for leadership and discipline. And it being in the 10th house is kind of a natural place for it to be. So it really helps with kind of career and being a leader. So that's pretty obvious for him. So we can look at to see where the 10th house ruler is to see what his career is connected to. So the 10th house, it has Cancer there, and Cancer is ruled by the moon. So the moon is in the third house. So the 10th house is connected to the third house, which means his career is connected to courage and being bold and going for things. That's some of the indications of the third house. But also communication and media and stuff like that. So, and because he has three planets there, it's also pretty significant. He has a lot of ties to the third house. So basically, some of the big things for him are the third house and the seventh house as big areas for him. Media, communication, as well as business and partnerships. So that's some of the main stuff in his birth chart. I also want to look at the moon chart real quick. So basically, another way you can look at a Vedic chart, especially when you don't have the precise birth time, you can just make the moon in the ascendant. You just kind of rotate the chart until the moon's in the ascendant, and then you look at the chart from the position, like from the viewpoint of the moon. And in Vedic astrology, they consider the moon to be the most primary planet. So one of the things I wanted to point out to this is he has Rahu in the seventh house from the moon. So it's opposite from the moon. So again, moving towards business and partnerships and stuff like that is really big. But then he also has all his Aries placements are in the fifth house, and fifth house is like past life talent and creativity. So he has this past life talent as like a leader. That's Aries is a very strong leadership energy. So that kind of indicates that he has a lot to pull from past lives, especially as being a leader. So really interesting stuff. He's got some intuitive abilities. With Moon K2 and Jupiter and K2 as a teacher from past lives, and then he has a strong Aries energy, which is leadership, but also like very strong like warrior, martial kind of energy. And then like last thing I was saying, Rahu in the ninth house is pretty significant for him developing a uniting philosophy in what he's wanting to communicate. So that's his Vedic chart. Really interesting stuff.